James Miller had always been an idealist. At 27, he had worked hard to secure a job at GlobalCore Ltd, one of the most trusted logistics companies in the city. Ever since joining as a junior administrative assistant, he believed he was part of something good. The company had a spotless reputation, priding itself on ethical practices, community engagement, and sustainable operations. It was the kind of place where people felt lucky to work. At least, that's what James thought, until everything changed. The CEO of GlobalCore, David Kane, was the epitome of success. A self-made man, he had built the company from the ground up and earned respect across the industry. Kane was well-spoken, with a calm demeanor and a reputation for fairness. His employees saw him as a figurehead of integrity, and James was no exception. In fact, he admired Kane. To him, Kane was a man who had done everything right. Someone James aspired to be like. But admiration didn't pay the bills. Despite the company's success, James found himself in a personal financial crisis. Mounting debts, failed investments, and rising living costs left him struggling to make ends meet. His job at GlobalCore was stable, but the paycheck wasn't nearly enough to pull him out of the hole he'd dug himself into. His rent was late, his bills piled up, and the weight of it all was suffocating. No matter how hard he worked, it never seemed to be enough. Desperation has a way of clouding judgment. After weeks of sleepless nights and agonizing over his finances, James began to think of ways to fix his situation. His thoughts became darker, more desperate. What if he could take something from the office? No one would suspect him. He'd been a loyal employee for years. His boss, David Kane, trusted him. And Kane's office, he knew, held plenty of valuables. It was risky. But James was running out of options. His back was against the wall. Early one morning, before the office opened, James decided to make his move. He arrived at the building hours before anyone else, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. His hands shook as he unlocked the door and slipped inside, the quiet of the empty office amplifying his every step. The sleek, modern design of GlobalCore now seemed cold and unwelcoming. The polished floors echoed underfoot as James made his way toward the CEO's office. David Kane's office was a symbol of success. The mahogany desk, the expensive artwork on the walls, and the luxurious leather chair all served as reminders of Kane's wealth and power. As James stepped inside, he felt a pang of guilt. This was a man he had looked up to, a man who had given him a chance when no one else had. But desperation drowned out the guilt. He needed to survive. James began rummaging through the desk drawers, looking for anything of value, cash, jewelry, anything he could quickly take and sell. He was so focused on his search that he didn't hear the approaching footsteps until it was too late. The door creaked open. James's heart stopped. Panic surged through him as he looked for a place to hide. The only option was a large cabinet near the back of the office, tucked into a corner. Without thinking, he darted behind it, pressing himself flat against the wall. His breath came in short, shallow gasps, his heart pounding in his ears. Two men entered the room. James recognized one of the voices immediately. It was David Kane. The other voice belonged to a man James had seen around the office on several occasions. He didn't know the man's name, but he knew that this individual frequently met with Kane behind closed doors. Their meetings were always short, their conversations private. James had never thought much of it, until now. The two men stood near the desk, their voices low but clear in the silence of the room. "We need to deliver the children as soon as possible," Kane said, his voice tense. "The cops are starting to get suspicious. We can't afford any delays." The words hit James like a punch to the gut. Children, what was Kane talking about? His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. The other man, his voice a deep, unsettling growl, responded, "Tomorrow. At the old construction site. You'll get the payment there. After that, the next batch needs to be ready. No mistakes this time." James's stomach turned. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Kane, his trusted boss, the man he had looked up to for years, was involved in something horrific. Human trafficking. The idea was too monstrous to grasp, but the words were unmistakable. They were selling children. Kane and the unknown man exchanged a few more words before leaving the office. As the door clicked shut behind them, James remained frozen behind the cabinet, his mind racing. His whole world had just crumbled. Everything he thought he knew about his company, about David Kane, was a lie. When the coast was clear, James stumbled out of his hiding place, his legs weak beneath him. He needed to get out of the office, away from this nightmare. But as he walked back through the building, the gravity of the situation weighed on him. He couldn't just walk away, he had to do something. But what? For the next few days, James struggled with his next move. He couldn't report Kane to the authorities without proof, and the risk was too high. He'd be marked as a thief if Kane turned the situation against him. But as he observed Kane in the office, James noticed the same secretive behavior, the same visits from the unknown man. It was all connected, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something truly evil was happening right under his nose. James knew he needed to find out more. He needed to catch Kane in the act, to gather evidence that could expose him once and for all. His chance came a few days later when he overheard Kane talking on the phone about a meeting at the old construction site, the same one mentioned in the earlier conversation. That evening, James followed Kane. He kept his distance, staying in the shadows as Kane drove to the abandoned construction site on the outskirts of town. The site was a decaying skeleton of a project that had been halted years ago, now overgrown with weeds and surrounded by rusting metal frames. It was the perfect place for a secret meeting. James crouched behind a pile of debris, his heart racing as he watched Kane arrive and meet with the unknown man. Their conversation was short, but what James overheard chilled him to the bone. The unknown man handed Kane a briefcase. "The payment is all here. The next order is for 25 children. Make sure everything is clean this time. Payment comes after delivery." James felt sick. His worst fears were confirmed. Kane wasn't just involved in illegal activity, he was at the heart of a human trafficking operation. The company James had worked for, the company he believed in, was nothing more than a front for something far darker. As James backed away, desperate to escape before he was noticed, his foot slipped on a loose piece of rubble. The sound was deafening in the quiet night. Kane and the unknown man turned, their eyes locking onto James. Panic surged through him, but before he could run, the unknown man pulled out a gun. 3 shots rang out, echoing across the empty construction site. James collapsed to the ground, his vision fading as the world around him went dark. 2 months passed. James's body lay hidden at the construction site, undiscovered and forgotten, until one fateful night. A homeless man, stumbling through the streets in a drunken haze, made his way to the abandoned construction site, looking for a place to sleep. As he wandered through the dark, his foot caught on something solid. Curious, he knelt down, squinting in the dim light. What he saw made him sober instantly, a decomposing body partially covered in debris. The man ran to the nearest police station, his heart pounding with fear and excitement. The discovery of the body sparked an investigation that quickly caught the attention of Sheriff Morgan Tate, a seasoned investigator known for his tenacity. Tate took over the case, determined to uncover the truth. He identified the body as James Miller, an employee of GlobalCore Ltd, and began his investigation by questioning David Kane. From the moment he met Kane, Tate's instincts told him something was off. Kane was calm, too calm, and his answers were rehearsed. Tate dug deeper, collecting evidence that painted a different picture. CCTV footage showed Kane's frequent meetings with the unknown man, and phone records placed Kane at the old construction site on the night James disappeared. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. When Tate confronted Kane with the evidence, the CEO crumbled. Under pressure, he confessed to his involvement in a human trafficking ring. He told Tate everything: how James had overheard the conversation, how the unknown man had killed him, and how they had tried to cover it up. With Kane's confession in hand, Tate set a trap for the unknown man. Using Kane as bait, he arranged a meeting at the old construction site. The unknown man arrived, unaware that the police were waiting in the shadows. As soon as he stepped out of his car, Tate and his team surrounded him. The unknown man reached for his gun, but the officers were quicker. He was arrested on the spot, and the human trafficking ring was dismantled. Justice was served, but the cost was high. James Miller's life was lost, a casualty in a dark world of lies and corruption. The company he had once believed in was gone, exposed for what it really was, a front for something much darker than anyone could have imagined.